All right, cool. Let everyone join the video here. And we got these set up and going. We'll go over some information here. We'll be using the blinding whiteboard. It's not too bright. I think I can lower the brightness. Oh no, it is all the way down brightness-wise. Is that better if it's brighter? Or is that worse? Better? Oh, that's too bright for me. You guys, no, it's worse for me. Too bad. I can't deal with that. That is way too bright for my liking. All right, cool. So we're going to get into this here. The other day, I talked about plyometrics, and I talked about jumping. Whiteboard. Yeah, you guys have questions you can ask. But one of the things we're talking about was adding variability or intentional variability into your plyometrics. So here's my guy who's going to jump, and here's my little hurdle I made here. Okay, what I can do here to add some very simple variability into my training is I can change the distances between each hurdle. So in a standard setup, a lot of people make a hurdle setup and they kind of just go, okay, well, here's your, let's say 2 foot of distance. And then they walk it out and they say, all right, here's your 2 feet of distance. And then they just go on and do their jumps. The issue that happens is this person, your brain, and your person that you're jumping is pretty smart. They know a thing or two. And when they jump and they land, they just kind of go through this very automatic form and fashion of jumping, just repeated over and over again. What you can do here is you can add some simple variability in a couple of ways. One of 3 ways I like to think about it. Number 1 is we can do distance. So we'll call that delta length, delta L. And that's going to be change in length, you can say D, distance, between hurdles, all right? So maybe one hurdle is short, the next hurdle is long, so we have to have some variability in the arc of our jumps. That's one way you can do this. Another way you can change and add some nice variability into your training is you can change the angle. So we can do something like hurdle here, and then we'll hurdle here, and then hurdle here. So I'll jump there, I'll jump there, and then I'll jump there. So now we're adding variability in terms of direction. And you can give that delta degrees. So change in degrees of each of your jumps. Again, this is a nice way that you can do a movement and add variability. Somewhat planned, somewhat, a little more difficult than just going straight forward over and over again. The next one you can do is we can add height. That's a bad drawing. That's a better drawing here. Height of the hurdle. And based on the height of the hurdle, you might require a different effort for someone, this guy thinking, oh, Mr. Brain over here, to perform movement. So you're adding variability into your jumps. This added variability is what's going to build a more robust motor pattern. So think about this twofold. One, it's the tissues being used in your body. This is your person. And number 2, it's the actual skill of jumping. And now when I jump, and I jump the same direction every time, if we're going to just draw a very simple muscle, hope I can draw this pretty well. All right, that is an okay muscle. We'll take that. That's adequate. That's my muscle. Let's change the colors here. We'll give it red for muscle. And if I jump the same every time, I'm going to have the same line of strain repeated over and over and over again. That strain line is going to be repeated. So we'll have very low tissue variability. Oh boy. You see that? Oh, very low tissue variability. I'll write that. You can see it better if I write it right here. Low tissue variability. Low tissue variability. Okay? So you have low tissue variability because of that. Now that's natural. If you think about it and you're doing a hurdle jump over and over again, you're going over the same hurdle, you expect the very same force vectors or similar force vectors to act on the body and therefore lead to adaptation of the tissues. Makes sense so far. Now, that's not really a great thing. It's a good thing, but it's not a great thing because when we play sports, we want to be able to handle large amounts of variability in movement. And when we're playing things like basketball, we're on the court and we're running and we're jumping. Let's see if I can draw a man running here. This person's running and they're going to run this way. And then they're going to have to stop and change direction this way. And They got all the defense and everything moving around in the background. Everything's going on. You're going to have a lot of variability in tissue load. So variability and tissue loading. Now, if we're just doing the hurdles, like my little hurdle example I'll draw right here that you can see, now we're getting the reactive strength stuff, the elasticity, the plyometric, but it's under a very low variable condition, which isn't the world's greatest thing because, again, if we think strain, so you can think about that as like the amount of strain or force acting on the body, plus direction, or we'll say vector, equals adaptation, adapt. So if I am training the body to have the same repeated effort over and over again, well, I'm having the same strain line occur over and over and over again. And there's actually some interesting research on this in regards to tendinitis and overuse issues, is when you have the same strain over the same vector over and over again, it might be a more susceptible means to create overuse itises. So strain plus vector equals adaptation. So again, my muscle I'm going to draw here, we'll make it red for muscle. Oh, pressure's on. That is not as good of a muscle. Kind of mediocre. And that made it worse. Whatever, that's my muscle. I'll now have to label it muscle because I'm bad at drawing. Muscle. Okay. Now, if I'm going to do my jumps that are higher variability, like I might jump this way and that way, and sometimes high and sometimes not as high, these strain lines and the vectors and the variability become much more variable. So we have maybe the same strain, because we're doing the same kind of jumps, that remains equal, but the vector of loading becomes more diverse. We'll call it just a higher rate of vector change. And because of that, we're loading the tissues in many different ways, and when it gets loaded in many different ways, it's going to have to adapt in many different ways. So it's going to adapt the motor program. Your brain is going to be like, hey, brain, let's learn to organize ourselves in this fashion. But also, it's going to actually cause adaptation in that muscle tendon unit. And what's another easy example of this? Well, that's a good question. It's running, jogging, sprinting, all that fun stuff. So if I'm going to go for a little run, and I'm Mr. Running Man here, that is a weird run, but I'm running this way, and I'm running, and I'm running, and I'm running. Well, I'm going to have the same cyclic pattern over and over again of my limbs hitting the ground and contacting the ground, but more importantly, my ankle. Ooh, can I draw an ankle? That is going to be tough. Let's go to the assisted drawing tools here. Maybe it'll help me out. Will it know what a foot is? That. Yeah, we got it. Very good. Look at that. Whoa, a foot. Very cool. We did it. Team effort. So we got my foot here. I can make it larger. And this foot, now if I'm running in a straight line, I can't flip it, unfortunately. So my foot's constantly being hit. And the vector might just be vertical, like hitting the ground, and I got to push back down. We'll change colors here. Now what can happen is if I just add something oh so simple, like I'm going to now run in a circle. Doesn't that seem silly? I'm just going to run in a circle. What's going to happen is I'm going to naturally will draw this from the straight on view. My person running in a circle. Ooh, a lot of pressure on this drawing here. Oh no. Could be worse, could be better. Is running along this circle. They're going to have an inside lean, and so this ankle is going to be under unique demands just because you're running in a circle. Not just a straight line, but a circle. And the nice thing about that is you're having variability of loading on the ankle, knee, and hip just by not running in a straight line, by literally just running in a circle. So we have really simple ways we can increase variability without having to change everything so dramatically. And what you might do, by the way, if you're starting with someone who's brand new, we'll just keep the foot out here as an example. Here's Mr. Foot. You can make him larger for the screen here so you guys can see him. When I first start training someone, let's just say, I don't know, an old person or I don't care who it is, I just want to be able to work within a strain and a variability they can handle. Okay? So I'm not trying to get too crazy. You know what? I'm going to do something here that might help you all really quick. I am going to use my text. So strain and, oh boy, I thought that was and variability. Okay? So strain and variability, I want to start with something that they can handle. Now what's going to happen is I might start with strain and increase that. So let's just have a little graph for strain. And this might be time. And this might be, well, I think this pen isn't dark enough for you guys to see. So let's do, that might be a better pen. It's a little thicker. So this is going to be time or sessions. And this might be strain. And I'm going to start it off and I'm going to kind of increase it and plateau, increase it and plateau, increase it and plateau. You can think of that as simple as something like, oh, we're going to introduce 2-foot single leg pogos, like really easy ones, really easy jumps. And then we might introduce something more intense and more intense and more intense. But what's happening then in the background is I also might bring about variability, might increase, but it might take a while before it increases. And it slowly builds up. So variability, this can be on the other axis, if I can spell. And I'm not doing an increase of both at the same time. So I'm having strain and variability, and simple things like I might have someone run and jog and get used to jogging. And once they've built that capacity to jog, I might add in a jog in a circle, a lateral side-to-side stuff, or things like that. So now I'm having strain be paired with variability. And it's just a nice way to organize some of your training, some of your straining. Good pun. Very good, Max. So does that make sense so far? Oh, hello, Mr. Foot. Cool. Another thing I want to talk about with plyometrics, if I get rid of this here, goodbye, is I want to talk about, oh no, go away. I want to talk about how it's actually a very useful for build, I don't call it core strength, but a stabilizing strength. So here's my person, no is in, let's make it this color. Here's my person here. A lot of pressure on my ability to draw. Whew, here we go. All right. Already screwed it up. I get nervous when I'm on camera. Drawing on camera is not easy. That's not bad. We'll take that. Cool. This is my person, and they're running and doing whatever. What's really important here is that when we do jumps and runs and things like that, we always default to think about the foot. Oh, because I'm going to plyometric, it's going to train my foot. That's kind of true. But what happens is when I hit the ground, of course my foot is the first and last thing to deal with the impact. But I have to have stabilization up the chain. So I'm going to have demands placed on my hip, my knee, even my torso. And anyone who's ever played a sport knows this. If you haven't played a sport in a while, go play basketball if you haven't played in a long time. And you go and play, and you're like, oh my gosh, my ribs are sore, my obliques are sore. Why? Well, because the inertial loading of these movements are very high and requires a rapid co-contraction. And that's the key thing here, a co-contraction. So what the heck is a co-contraction? Well, thanks for asking. I appreciate the questions in the audience. Oh, let's see if it knows what a knee is. Can I draw a leg? Will it know what a leg is? I think it's a nose. Oh, cool, we got a leg. Very good, very exciting, right on. Neat. All right, so we'll just make it really simple. We have my leg, and we'll say we have quad. I don't want to draw. Stop that. And I have hamstring. Now it's a little simple, but you get it. Okay, quad and hamstring. A co-contraction is we know this is a flexion, and we know this is extension. And it causes extension around the joint, so quad causes the joint to move this way, the hamstring causes it to move this way. A co-contraction is when we have quad equal ham, or extension and flexion equal each other, and that creates a stabilization around the joint, but also force production without movement. So we're able to produce force. A really simple example for you guys at home. You guys want to try it out? You can take your finger and you can flick it, right? You ever done like a flick of a finger? When you kind of just do this, right? It's not, you don't have much speed, but you can flick a finger. Like you can't just like snap your finger. You can snap it when you build up tension, and then you add enough speed to it. If I just do this, I can't snap it, right? And the reason why that's important is because when I press into this, I'm pressing down with this finger and back up with this finger. There's no movement occurring, but then I release my thumb, it snaps. Pow! I have lots of force all of a sudden being produced. So what happens here is during some of these contacts, we have joint stabilization with the quad. Hits the ground, boom, stabilization. And the hamstring, if you just draw the little EMG of what it might look like, if I can draw, I think it'll fit in. We'll say it might look like this. They both are firing. That's my EMG muscular rate. They both are firing. And we'll say this top one is a ham. And eventually, when it's stabilized and the ground contact has ceased, the quad will still fire into extension, and the hamstring will kind of essentially relax and allow for the extension pattern to occur. So when we do our jumps and runs and things like that, we have these co-contractions occurring throughout our hips, ankles, and knees. And that's why it's things like jumping and running are so different than that of squatting and lifting heavy weight. Because we get this impulsive like loading. And you can think of it kind of like a bouncy ball is an easy way to think about it. Who do I want to erase? We'll erase this guy here. Sorry. Sorry, Mr. Knee. Goodbye. Cool. And we'll go and you kind of think about lifting weights is almost like a tugboat where you're pulling something along, you have constant tension. But when you have a sprint or a jump or a run, a ball. Oh, I gotta draw the ball. A ball. Cool. We have a bouncy ball. I don't know if it's a bouncy ball. We'll pretend it's a bouncy ball. We have a ball. And when this thing hits the ground, all right, we're going to give it, you guys can see that good? We'll just get rid of everything here. Just the bouncy ball. And it's going to, let me draw the path of it. Well, I made this one smaller, but you guys can deal with it. So here's the ground here. We draw a ball from a height. The ball hits the ground and it bounces back up. And what we get here is we get a certain falling, a rapid impulsive loading, and a spring back up. This is the same way when we run and jump and sprint, we have this rhythmic impulsive like loading. Now what's interesting about that is during this time period of the fall, there is no active force production on the ground, and during the time force of the air, there's no active force production on the ground. So if you want to finish the drawing, it would have looked like this. Good, you guys can see it. Come here. Right on. And we get these like breaks in the action and then a force, and a break in the action and then force. If I draw it like this, which is a kind of a wild way to draw it, we can think big force production, relax, 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 big force production, relax, relax, relax. So one feeds into the next. If you guys saw my jump rope video this morning of that guy who set the world record of jumping rope, you can notice he looks like a bouncy ball. The subsequent bounces feed into the next. Now what happens is during this time period, we are like a bouncy ball in the sense that we're not acting on the ground. But we're not like a bouncy ball because we don't have innate elastic properties. We're not like if you just hit the ground, we bounce back up. We have contractile properties that allow us to do that. So the contractile properties of the muscles allow for optimal vertical stiffness. So stiffness when you hit the ground to resist deformation, like when the bouncy ball hits the ground. A good bouncy ball, you can think of it like a spring constant. What is that, the formula K or something? It's like the amount of force relative to deformation to the elastic return. So you can think about it like this. I'm falling and I hit the ground. When I hit the ground pushes back into me. And then how much delta change in deformation relative to the force is the stiffness we have. Stiffness, and the rate of return of that deformation is the elasticity. So when we hit the ground, we spring back up. We have to actively produce stiffness, vertical stiffness on the ground. When we hit the ground, muscles contract. The contraction around the muscles allows for the tendinous structures to have elastic return, and and part of that, it allows it to then recoil and then jump back up nice and high off the ground after that. But that only occurs if you have the appropriate vertical stiffness, which is being produced from your active contractile components of your muscles. Does that make sense? So I think I covered most of what I wanted to cover today. I did not answer anyone's questions because I didn't. Too bad. I wanted to talk about what I wanted to talk about here. And I might do another video later on today. It is very possible. So cool. If there are any lingering questions, I suppose you can ask. And we'll see what we have. And if not, that's okay too. We can discuss more things in the future. I think that's everything I wanted to discuss for today, because what we could dive into next time is things like with the contractile component, what is creating the vertical stiffness, the type 2 fibers, is the tightening of the muscles, how does rate of force development play a role, and you can get kind of into the weeds of all this. On top of that, when you think about it, by the way, if I draw my muscle, that's how we kind of draw muscles in the science. And then we have, that's my tendon, and this is the bone. When we have muscles, if this is producing active stiffness, right, this is the guy that's going to be responsible for active stiffness. The properties of this muscle and its time course of force application is very important. But it's force application in preparation. So if I draw like a force time curve here, it's not just like, oh, how much force can I produce, but it's how fast I can produce that force, because the time period when you're in the air isn't very long. And so you're trying to create stiffness rapidly and then have enough force to brace yourself against said contact. But again, we'll dive into that in another time. I appreciate you guys listening as always. I hope you enjoy. Take care. That's all I got for you today. Peace out. Bye-bye.